Thank you and welcome everyone to our next Ask an Expert webinar on project stage gates. So we got Mark today, Mark Soyser, our Executive Director, that's going to present on that topic. And if you'd like to ask any questions, you can either use the chat channel or you can use the raise your hand feature, and we'll call out when we're ready for the question. So I welcome you all to take part and join the conversation, and I'll let Mark kick this off.
Thank you, Cecilia. Hello, everybody. Lovely to see you arriving here so plentiful. So clearly, stage gate approval processes is a topic that is of interest. Well, purely because in living in a project management environment, we often need to deal with those stage gates approvals, which as a project manager can actually be quite restrictive when it comes to managing projects in its own right. So we asked us internally, of course, also the big question, stage gates, what are they good for? So throughout the next hour, I'm going to talk about the why, the how, and also the design of those stage gate approvals. And no doubt will open up the audience so that you can give us some feedback on your experience with stage gate approval processes. All right, let's get going. So first of all, I wanted to outline project stage gates and why we actually do them. Well, in order for us to understand that, I think it's important that we outline how traditional project portfolio management is actually incorporated into your day-to-day business environment. So generally, how we see that is what we call the old way and the new way, in particular in regards to the industry that we are in. Now, in the last 10 years, really, we always ensured that we implemented solutions that allows users to follow a particular process and really put the process into the forefront. And that, of course, also includes stage gate approval processes. These days, more and more organizations really put people before process, ensuring that solutions and project management can be managed in such an intuitive way that not only professional project managers, but also accidental or citizen project managers have the ability to follow those stage gate approvals. So I thought I'll outline what that actually means from a traditional project portfolio management perspective. So generally, organizations, of course, have their strategic goals, and strategic goals that are defined and planned need to be communicated further down into an area of what we refer to into portfolio or program management, where we literally outline those high-level initiatives that we want to have executed, so that our strategic goal can be accomplished. Now, generally, we have a governance body that we refer to as the PMO, the Project Management Office, and really this is where the area flows into the stage gate approval processes, because we need to ensure that we provide a consistent way for us executing projects, or actually trying to predict the future, because ultimately that's what we're trying to do within our projects. Well, once we have those projects then selected, generally departments or areas of the business then execute those projects. There could be, very small projects and very big projects. Now, if everything goes well, of course, these initiatives are then managed, these projects are managed. The PMO assists the team and reports up against the progress. And I will refer back to this PMO reporting progress, because ultimately what we want to be able to provide is insights that is trustworthy. And that's really the area where stage gates come into place as well. Of course, at the same time, it means that portfolio management have the ability to evaluate the success of their initiatives, and also have the ability to determine whether projects are actually progressing in a way that they were planned beforehand. And if everything goes well, we accomplish our strategic goals, and yay, our executive managers are generally very happy. With that, I'm quickly introduce Andy Newman. Hi, Andy, who is our CEO. And I know if he accomplishes his strategic goals, he's a happy man. that being said, most of the challenges that we see in this particular model is really why stage gates are important, and why we are thinking that stage gates are super vital in order to do, well, the following. It really is all about consistency and trustworthiness of data when it comes to project management. Some projects are very small, some projects are very long and large. And in order for us to put some consistency into the steps of executing those projects, stage gates are actually commonly there. Now, the issue with stage gates, and I'll refer to that as well as sort of that waterfall and agile capability, the challenges of consistency and trustworthiness really comes in many different ways. First of all, a lot of departments actually struggle with the administration of those stage gates, or actually the administration of project managements, and feel that often stage gate approval processes brings or holds the project back. Well, at the same time, we have, of course, different levels of project management maturity within organizations, meaning a very professional project managers versus the citizen project managers. And we also see that, of course, a lot of the projects that we manage through the stage gates are actually not managed only by professional project managers, but by those accidental project managers as well. Well, not to mention the different project management maturities is one aspect, but managing projects has changed over the last 10 years. In particular, we had that classical waterfall approach where we had the ability to say, design, initiation, design, planning, execution, closing. Well, within our industry, Agile has become very prominent, of course, and we need to ensure that we outline and capture all methodologies and ensure that these stage gates are actually withheld as part of these methodologies. Well, of course, PPM tools or project management tools provide a mechanism to introduce that consistency in stage gate approval. Look, in the past, we've done that with, actually with Excel spreadsheets or Word documents that we then filled in, outlining all of the checklists that need to be done in order to move into that next stage gate. However, thank goodness to the 21st century and to cloud-based technology, we do have the ability these days to automate that. Well, and therefore, the need to provide an easy way to manage stage gate has actually become very important. I will outline this later at the demo with Sensei IQ, where I wanted to outline how easy and intuitive it is to follow those stage gates. So, bottom line is project gates and project gate reviews are both concepts that provide key communication opportunities, allowing us that the project is actually going to move into the next stage. It also, of course, allows the key stakeholders to ensure that the project is actually tracking as initially planned as well. Well, that's sort of the high-level concept of why we believe that stage gates and stage gates approvals are super important, especially larger organizations where we want to ensure that everybody is on the same page. So stage gates for me are really ways of communicating and approving to go ahead with projects. All right. Now, some of these, so these are really the whys of stage gates. So how do we actually implement them? Well, I wanted to outline this on a couple of examples. Obviously, what is a gate? And I looked at the PMI, the Project Management Institute, who has a very interesting article around stage gate approvals. Really, a gate for us is a means of access that allows us to go through that next stage. Now, in our environment, we can see that quite often by outlining these stage gate approvals really with a visualization on top of the project execution tool, so that everybody always knows where we currently are within our project and what kind of checklists we need to fulfill in order to go to that next stage gate. Now, stage gate approval processes, quite interestingly, there are organizations out there that just simply go through the notion of stage gates without the approval. And there are certainly some stage gates that may not actually require approval, but require just simply information outlining that we have passed this particular stage gate. However, generally speaking, stage gates need to be checked or need to be governed, whether this is by the PMO or whether this is by the key stakeholders, or even, by finance when it comes to particular budgets that may need to be released. Outlining that is actually not just from a project perspective, the stage gates, but it actually starts reasonably earlier with the initial idea, and really going through those stage gates and funnels enables us to ensure that information that we have captured at the start, let's say a great idea, follows all the way through to the project execution and the benefit realization behind it. So I wanted to outline that, and wanted to outline a couple of different stage gate examples. And there are a whole bunch of different ways how you can, of course, name your stage gates. But overarchingly, I think it's super important that we identify what kind of gates do we need within the organization to ensure that we are on top of our projects and that we can progress in that next into that next stage of a project. And for us really, and for the PMBOK in that particular instance, they have some really nice definitions of defining each of the stage gates that are consistent, and defining each of the processes that need to happen in order to move through the next stage gates. And for us, that is often checklists or particular signatures that allow us then to move into that next stage. Well, and ultimately, the outcome of each individual gate can have different capabilities. You can either say, yes, I approve that, and you can go into the next phase. You can say, no, I need to do some rework in order for us to go to that next stage. Or alternatively, we just simply say, you know what, this project is not going to work for us, so we're just simply going to cancel that. So in many ways, it is a risk mitigation strategy for us to ensure that we don't run wild with our projects. So what exactly does that mean from a different framework perspective? Now, in the past, when we think about project management, we have that classical traditional waterfall capability where we start with our design and go into our planning and execution and closing of our projects. But the world of methodologies have obviously changed, and we've kept on asking us the question, well, if I think about it in an agile component, we have certain areas that allow us to execute a project from the initial idea. In our instance, it's called the project vision, all the way to defining those requirements or epics with a solution backlog, and then we are going through different sprints. Now, when I look at the overarching process flow in comparison to a classical waterfall process flow, I have lots of organizations that say, well, how can I ensure, no matter what kind of methodology I use, that I actually run through those kinds of stage gates? Well, interestingly enough, we went through an exercise where we said, okay, well, the reason why we want to ensure stage gates are implemented is to provide that consistency and insights for key stakeholders so that they can actually run their strategy. And for us, it really is all about business strategy and ensuring that we provide the information in a meaningful manner. Now, business strategy can generally be broken down into different areas. In our instance, in that particular example, it's different portfolios, and these different portfolios are generally based on, well, fear, fact, or faith, as we like to call it. Fear as in, hey, if I don't develop this project, or if I don't have that new capability that I implement through the project, I won't be able to keep my lights on. Fact, of course, is to ensure that we keep on our return on investment, that we implement project that brings our organization further. Well, and faith really is about that next capability that we want to incorporate into our overarching organization. Classical R&D, new offers, all of those things, intuition and belief, as we like to call them. Well, when I look at those different capabilities from a traditional PPM, meaning centralized control, project overload, detailed project plan, centralized annual planning, we have that traditional stage gate approval processes. And if I now compare that to our agile approach, where we really have more a decentralized decision making, where we want to be able to quickly introduce new feature sets and capability, how does that actually all fit together from a stage gate perspective? Well, in our instance and in our example, we can actually create what I refer to as the umbrella, overarching umbrella above the methodologies, where we can say, well, we still have to initiate a project. We still have to plan a project. And of course, we still have to execute a project, no matter whether this is in a waterfall or in an agile environment. Well, if you think about it, sprints and sprint planning is nothing else but the execution of the project. It's really the epic, the project vision and the epics and the solution backlogs in the agile capability that enables you to do your classical planning in that stage gate process. So in order for us to bring those methodologies together, we literally have to ensure that stage gates are, well, overarching capabilities, no matter whether you have a very small or very large project. And I'll show you that in a second. So ultimately, justification always matters. In our instance, we may have business cases in the traditional sense, epics in the agile sense, and even for smaller projects, small initiatives that we need to get approved. It doesn't mean that every single project has to go through the same stage gates at any point in time. And let me show you what I mean. Now, what I'll do is I'm just going to switch over into a solution, into a project management solution, and I'll show you how stage gate approval processes are actually incorporated as part of a project. So here, at this point in time, I have a major project and I have the ability to open up my project in its own right, and I can see exactly what my current status is. So this project is 8 months old and we are still in the planning phase. And right now, when I look at that stage gate, in order for me to move from a planning into an execution stage, we need to be able to fill in certain sets of information. Now, smaller projects may only have an execution and a closing component, or larger projects may have a design, planning, execution component. So it's super important that we understand what kind of purpose that particular stage gate fulfills on one hand, and who approves that and why these stage gates are approved. Now, I mentioned it earlier, stage gates actually start from a project management perspective earlier than when we approve the project. We do this quite often already at a proposal stage, where I literally have the ability to say, hey, I've got this proposal that I would like to implement as a project. And as you can see here, for example, is a proposal, automatic solar tracker, where we literally start the initiation. And as part of that initiation, we need to make sure that we have our business case completed, that we have potentially a project manager assigned to it, and that the department actually approved this business case or that proposal to be tracked further. Once the business case is completed and once the proposal is made to execute that project, we then literally have the ability to automate that, where we say, hey, the steering committee has approved that. Once that is approved, I can now execute that and make that a project. Now, translating that capability from stage gate approval processes and looking at that from an executive perspective, most executives are only ever interested in stage gates if it affects of course, their strategy. And what we do is we outline this in terms of stage gate funnels, where an executive has the ability to look at all of the different information sets that makes up their portfolio of work in order to fulfill that. So in that instance, you can see an intake funnel, meaning, hey, I want to be able to manage all of the information sets, and I want to be able to approve those information sets and continue to further an idea into a proposal, into a project, and ultimately into the fulfillment of my strategic values. So in that instance, I can see I have three different strategic initiatives: run as in keeping your light on, grow as in growing the organization, and transform as in ensuring that your organization becomes more effective. Now, when it comes to the identification of that information, as you can see that here, we actually literally start with an idea, and we say, hey, we've got this great idea, and based on this idea, we believe we want to accomplish something to execute our strategy. And of course, through those stage gate approval processes, I now have the ability to say, okay, once I identified that idea, I want to review the idea. And once that idea is reviewed, I want to be able to initiate that to become a project proposal, which in that instance right now in the initiation, you will see it actually moves the information from an ideas perspective into a proposal perspective, enabling you to ensure that you know why you actually start executing it, and ensuring that you have that justification behind it. In our instance, we always compare costs to benefits in comparison to the effort, so that we have a bit of an understanding whether we want to execute that to become a project, which in our instance in the selection stage enables us to do that as well. So in that instance, we now have all of the information available throughout our proposal, and we then have the ability to say, hey, this proposal will become a project. In that instance, I have 4 different proposals that will become ultimately projects as well. Now, once these proposals have become project, that's really where those stage gates approval of, in our instance, planning, execution, and closing come from. Look, we have lots of different organizations that have many stage gates depending on the type of project that you have. In our instance, we wanted to make sure that we outline a funnel to represent every single stage gate, no matter what type of project that is. So in this particular instance, we say no matter how big or small a project is, as a bare minimum, a stage gate should need to be planning, execution, and closing. And as you can see here, I then have the ability to see, well, right now I have 16 projects that are executed, and I only have 2 that are in the closing. So we need to make sure that these ideas run through ensuring that my resources are actually completely occupied through new projects or through the execution of those projects. So I wanted to outline that as an example, and also wanted to open up the audience to see what kind of stage gates do you have? Yes, can you hear me? Hello. All right, I'll continue. So before I open that up, I do wanted to outline how we design stage gates within Sensei. Often we have organizations that say, look, we have lots of different projects, but we don't really know how we get them under control. Well, for us, it really is all about providing a consistent process managing your projects. What we generally do is we start with the end in mind, meaning what kind of visualization or what kind of insights do you need in order to make an objective decision within your organization. This is generally happening on an executive or on a senior management level, so that they have the visibility making the right decision at the right time. Well, we then look at the different types of projects that you have. As I said earlier, we may have a minor project, we may have a major project, we may have an agile project, we may just simply have a little initiative or BAU work, and based on those type of projects, we can then determine, well, what kind of governance or stage gate do I actually need? This agreement of the governance is super important. And if you work in a large organization, you will actually find that it's quite challenging coming coming up with a consistent approach of stage gate approval processes. The picture that you see on the right-hand side at the moment represents 7 different stage gates because it's a major project. I want to stress that point again. When organizations implement stage gates, it does not mean that every project needs to go through every single stage gate. However, every project should go through at least some of those stage gates. As I showcased that earlier, in our instance, it's planning, execution, and closing as well. Now, once you have come up with that governance, then to implement the capability is actually not all that difficult, especially if you have a project portfolio management solution where you then literally have project types, and once you create that project, you then automatically have the appropriate stage gate approvals. So this is how we generally design our stage gate approval processes, starting really at the top, ensuring that we understand what kind of budget approval processes need to happen, what kind of final execution processes need to happen in order to execute and close a project. Interestingly enough, and I'd love to hear your feedback on that as well, do you think that we also need program and portfolio stage gates, or is that really only something that projects should implement? And with that I'd love to have your experience on how you are dealing with your project stage gates. Is there anybody out there that deals with project stage gates? Don't be shy. Well, I know at least half of you, and I know at least half of them are actually using stage gates as well. Cecilia, are there any questions, or is there any feedback?
A question just came through from Robert. He said, looking to include program stage gates as well. Oh, yeah, no, he just made that comment. Yep.
Well, it's a good question, really. Monica, please.
Hi, thanks, Mark. Yes, we do use stage gates, but we don't use them as effectively as we want to use them. So that's probably why we're here as well. We're finding that sometimes it's a challenge for us to identify who the approvers should be. And I'm sorry about my background noise.
That's okay.
Working from home with builders.
As we all do.
So sometimes it's a challenge for us to do that. So we end up taking the responsibility on within the PMO themselves to say, okay, we're all right to progress with that. So what we're quite looking forward to in the new IQ solution is getting that right and engaging the right areas of the business, including the executive, for them to be the right approvers.
It's a very interesting comment that you made there, and I hear this quite often, Monica, that the PMO then ultimately, which is the governance body of projects, so I do get that, but are they really the decision makers of going through the stage gates? Look, with some of them I can see that, but with others, clearly key stakeholders need to be involved. The example that you outlined here would be, well, why would we want to have a stage gate approval process if there is no key stakeholder? Or alternatively, we could say, well, every single stage gate that we have needs to have a key stakeholder, and that key stakeholder needs to understand what they approve through those stage gates. Again, it's, I think, super important to understand that really stage gates are nothing else but communication ways and approval ways. We have done this in the past in schedules quite often, where we go through those different phases within a schedule, ensuring that we break up the chunk of work that we have as project managers, so that we can keep sense across our projects, right? Now, in a program management area, and you asked that question as well, we don't see that this often, funnily enough. Maybe that's because a program and portfolio, for that matter, consists of multiple projects and sub-programs, of course, and because these projects go through the stage gates, maybe there is no need for us to think about that on a program level. Monica.
Yes, we certainly find that we use the concept of programs which align to our directorates as a grouping more than we do for an approval. And also we're quite annual in our planning process, so it exists for an extended period of time. So we're finding we don't approve necessarily at the program level.
Yeah, and that is my experience as well, Monica. You mentioned approval processes. We see that as well, especially with utility organizations or large organizations that really need to apply for annual funds for projects. Meaning that you may have a project already in flight, but you can't continue until this budget release has been granted. And these types of stage gate approvals quite often actually happen on an annual basis, where then the sudden rush of every project manager comes in. They need to be able to have the information available and the budget, the budget proposal available to then get approved. It would be interesting to hear whether there are organizations out there that have a very similar approach when it comes to budget approval and doing that through stage gates. Are there anyone out there that does that? Obviously not.
I do have, though, however, a comment in the chat channel from Steve McEwen saying that's how I've set up our PMO. We call the approach PMO Light, methodology agnostic, dependent on the project.
Yeah, interesting concept. And look, a stage gate approval process, I couldn't agree more, needs to be methodology independent, because the reason for those stage gates is not to check the way that we manage projects, but the outcome really ultimately of the projects, and ensuring that these outcomes are checked throughout the project life cycle from initiation, planning, execution, and closing. Yeah, interestingly. Well, look, we do have a couple of questions that were submitted a bit earlier. One in particular was, we need the ability to obtain stage gate approvals from individual names in each project, from a sponsor, business owner, or even product owner, rather than from a member of a generic Active Directory group. So it really means is, hey, I want to be able to determine what kind of stage gate or who approves the type of stage gate. And every single stage gate for every single project needs to have an individual associated to that. So look, technically this is very possible and actually quite easy to obtain in Sensei IQ. And look, I wanted to outline how quickly you can actually do this. So what I'll do is I'll quickly switch back into my solution, if I then have it here, and show you what all of that actually means. So in my instance, I have a particular, I have my, I'm sorry, here we go. In my instance, I have a project. Let me just quickly bring that back. And within, okay, not in this project, that's an operational project that doesn't have any stage gates. In that instance, I have projects that goes to the planning, execution, and closing. Now, once I select this next stage, I ultimately determine who has access to this particular, or who has the approval processes. Now, the reason why we generally do this through Active Directory groups is because it's a consistent way for us to ensure that even if I assign, let's say, Joe Blocks to a particular stage gate and Joe Blocks leaves, well, who would then approve that stage gate? By incorporating that into Active Directory groups literally means that anybody within that Active Directory group could approve that. But really, technically, there's no reason why we can't associate an individual resource to approve those stage gates. At the same time, the question was asked, well, how easy is it actually to amend those kind of stage gates for those project online users and Jumpstart and Empower users? You know that we are using, well, in Jumpstart still the project online, or actually SharePoint workflow, whereby in Empowered we are starting to use Power Apps, that canvas-driven Power Apps, where we draw that. And what you see here is really the end evolution of Microsoft's business process flow, and that's what they're referred to. And you can very easily incorporate and change that across the organization. Look, I'll quickly show you in my instance. I'm going to go and open up a particular project app. Let me just do that here. And this is essentially the app that I just outlined. And when I edit those apps, we then have the ability to say, hey, this particular business process flow needs to change. And the way that we do this is really by business process flow changes, where we incorporate certain business process flows. So in my instance, I would like to amend my major project business process flow and incorporate additional stage gates or additional checklists. As you can see, here's the planning, execution, closing, just like we had them before. And here are those different steps. Now, if you wanted to add another stage gate, well, all you really need to do is you need to say, hey, I would like to add another stage, and you add that to this new stage gate here, and then you have the ability to say, you know, let's say that post implementation stage gate. You can categorize that and do all of these wonderful things under the solution in its own right. So for all of your IQ users, as you can see, changing and amending those stage gate approval processes from a technical perspective is actually super easy. Once you have completed your stage gates, all you need to do is save it, of course, and once it's saved, it will flow into the application in its own right, and then you would have a new stage gate. Now, I won't do that here. I won't mock up our project, but I wanted to outline how easy it is to actually incorporate those stage gates. So it's not a technical question. It really is a question of why do I need those business process flows or stage gates, and who is going to be in charge of approving them. Now, with that, I am conscious of time. I am opening up for another couple of questions. Now, the project stage gate best practices was the other feedback that we received from you guys. As I mentioned earlier, when it comes to the design, make sure that you understand the outcome, the end point in mind, the dashboard, as I like to call it, or the insights, so that I know exactly what kind of information does my executive need in order to steer the operation into the right direction. Then you outline your projects or the type of projects, minor projects, major projects. And once you've identified those, you have the ability to determine what type of stage gates you will need. And that's really how that project stage gate best practices works. Now, with that, I am opening up for questions, feedbacks, a little bit of interactions. We've got lots of people on the line. Monica, thank you, Monica.
That's all right. I'll kick it off. It was all too quiet.
Yes, it is.
I'm wondering about the flows, and so that you've talked about the process that we should go through internally in order to determine what those flows are. You've got some questions at each stage gate. And they look like maybe it's a date that someone enters that they did something. It's like a checklist confirmation. Yeah. Is that something that is responded to simply by answering that small bit of information there, or does it go back and check the project data to say, oh yes, that bit's been filled in, or is it just a part of it?
Outstandingly good question, Monica. I hear that quite often, and really, stage gate approval has to do with workflow. We all love the idea of workflow because it automates things. I believe that there is a balance to that. So we do have organizations that say, hey, before I am able to tick a box, or before I'm able to just simply say, hey, I completed that, I do want to have a check. Well, the main issue that we see is actually the check is not so much whether that information is there, it's actually the content in its own right. And what a technology can't do is it can't interpret the content behind it. So finding that balance of automation, which technically and also from a real world environment prolongs a project. It doesn't make it more flexible. The more workflow you have, the more restriction you have, and that also means you lose flexibility. So I really believe that there is a balance. And that's my personal opinion, I believe that a checklist that I consciously need to check from incomplete to complete, as I do that here, for example, I believe is actually enough, because it needs to go to the approver, to the key stakeholder or the PMO anyway. And they do need to check that information as well, because they need to read through the content. So if you ask me, yes, there is technically the purpose, the ability there to determine that, but I would always say, let's not try to overbake it. If you think that you can implement a process flow and workflow to replace certain actions from people, then that's not the right path. So it's really that balance of ensuring, hey, this is a project that goes through this particular stage gate, so therefore I need to make sure that I check that I make sure that all of the information is available before I then approve that. We do not want to automate that. Well, at least not right now, maybe in the future with AI.
Yes, thank you. I think that suits our executive approach as well. They just want the confirmation that particular thing has been looked at, and assume that the party doesn't lie by checking the box.
And it's interesting that you say that. It's actually very true. We did a survey on executives and did ask, what is it that makes you approve a project? And in Empower, we actually implemented that. They say, yes, of course, that it is governed and that it is checked by the PMO, but they also are very much influenced by the confidence factor of the project manager. So in Empowered, for example, we have a 5-star rating of each stage gate approval, where the project manager can rate their confidence factor. And if the confidence factor has 5 stars, then the executive is mostly inclined to continue with the project and go through that stage gate approval process. Yeah, very super interesting. Cecilia, you had some questions?
Yes, I've got Dennis Clara that sent in a question. He asks, is it necessary to reflect a task name, say stage gate, planning complete, in the WBS schedule, or is it possible to automate the workflow once the task is updated in the task level of the schedule?
That's a very good question, and I hear that question all the time. So really the question is, well, if I think about a work breakdown structure, right, a project schedule, as I do that here, and I hope that is a nice one. I've just arbitrarily looked at a project here. Yeah, it has a couple of them, not a lot. And let me just go into my timeline so that we have a bit of an understanding what that looks like. So let's assume I have a project here that has those stage gates. Let's say these are all phases, and within those phases are certain tasks, and within those tasks, once those tasks are completed, we then can essentially say, hey, this phase is completed, and therefore we should be able to go through the planning stage gate. Now, the answer to the question is technically that is a yes, but we actually strongly recommend not to link the schedule into those stage gate approvals. Yes, you need to line them up, no doubt. But it quite often happens that you do want to go through a stage gate even though a previous task has not been completed 100%. It is not uncommon, actually it's very common, that organizations and projects are not just in one but in both phases, where we say, well, look, we are nearly finished with the planning, but we want to start the execution already. So therefore, the answer to that question, in my opinion, would be, I wouldn't do it unless there is a really good justification behind that. Cecilia, is there anything else?
Thanks, Mark. And no, there's no other questions that have come through the chat channel. So now's your chance. Leave it for a little bit whilst I can do a little bit of the wrap up just to say what happens after this. We'll send out the survey. We still appreciate any feedback that we can get on these sessions, any future topics that you'd like us to bring up. Happy to hear that as well. The recording will also be sent out to you. Please also follow us on LinkedIn. We send any updates or anything, the recording as well on LinkedIn, and any other events that are coming up. We now have a new Sensei events page where we actually keep all our upcoming Ask an Expert events coming up, so you can see the next 3 to 4. So I'll send the link out to you so you can access it, and that will give you the chance to sign up for them early. And then also, if you're a customer care customer, you can also ask an expert all the time. So please let us know if there are certain things that come up in mind that you like to chat to us about. If you're not, please reach out to us, and we can talk to you about having that available for you.
Yeah, and just a quick reminder, here is the website where you can then go on to Insights and Events, and under Events you will actually find the Ask an Expert web series. We run them on a very regular basis, as you know. This one here is for ours today. Next one is on the 11th of September, maximizing reporting within a project management solution. This will be super interesting. So what I encourage you to do is select that link and mark it and make sure, this is Phil, who is an awesome presenter, and register for it. Reporting in project management, well, is the same. Without reporting, there is no project management at the end of the day. Well, look, with that, just a quick reminder, Cecilia, please follow us on LinkedIn. Make sure that you see the website, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to go on to Let's Chat at sensei.cloud. We are always happy to have an active audience.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you everyone for joining.
Thanks. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.